All right, folks, hold on to your handbags. It's going to be a bumpy ride. All right, let's start this business. So, let's talk about a few pictures. I photographed him during the presidential election campaign. And I remember saying to him, you know, my mom thinks you're fantastic, and she really hopes you make it to the White House. So he leaned forward and he said, tell your mum I said hi. So then he got in, and then I was invited to the White House to do the first portrait of his wife as First Lady. And I got a little overwhelmed at one point as I was taking this frame, and I said, right, my love, I want your soul, give it to me. So all her advisors, all her aides gasped in horror, and this look came over her face, the eyebrow raised. And then I realised after I'd taken the frame what I just said. So I said, oh my God, I'm an Englishman, we're supposed to be good at this. I called you my love and I demanded your soul, and you're the First Lady, please forgive my atrocity. She gave me a kiss on the cheek and whispered in my ear. She said, Platon, when all is said and done, I'm just Michelle. All right, here we go. I was in this hotel suite. They shut down a whole 200-room Marriott hotel to do this picture. And it was my first presidential portrait, and it should have been my goddamn last. So there was a man from the Secret Service in my room watching every move I made as I set up the lights. And I could hear through his walkie-talkie suddenly, the president is in the building. And then I heard, the president is having a Diet Coke break. The president has finished his Diet Coke. He will be in 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8. By the time he walks in the room, I swear, I could hear choirs singing, doves were flying out of his back. It was like meeting Elvis in a white suit. So I says to him, Mr. President, will you show me the love? And all his advisors went, no way, we don't do love. We've just recovered from Lewinsky. We don't do love anymore. And he said, shut up, I know what he means. He put his hands on his knees and gave me the Clinton charisma and magic. And of course, to my horror, when this was published, Larry King and Bob Woodward spent an hour on TV analysing the picture, accusing me of gross photographic misconduct. And they said, the hands are big to feel you up. The face says I got away with it. The legs are splayed, and the tie is an arrow. Run and hide, folks, run and hide. So, I was led into his private dacha by gunpoint. It was a cold, dark, bleak forest outside Moscow. It was so intimidating. Eventually, they led me into the room, which is his office, where they dissolved the Soviet Union, very historic place. And I was setting up my portrait light, and I needed power. Now, I'm probably not supposed to say this, but what the hell. So, I needed power. I looked to the side of his desk, and there was a plug socket with a plug in it. So I went to pull it out so I could replace it with mine. And all his bodyguards jumped on me saying, Niet! Don't touch the wire! They pointed and it led onto his desk, into the back of a red phone in a glass case with a button. So then Putin walks in, and I said to him, I'm a massive Beatles fan, are you? And he took off his translating earpiece, and in Russia, ushered all his advisors out of the room. And it was me, Putin, and about 15 bodyguards. It was very cozy. So he said in perfect English, let's talk man to man. So I said, well, I'd like to know if you're a Beatles fan. He said, I love the Beatles. I said, I don't believe you. I said, what's your favourite song? He said, Yesterday. So I said, this is ridiculous. So that pop culture allowed me to get 1.5 inches away from his nose and to capture that steely personality that he has. All right. He picked the worst moment in history to pose for me. Okay? I was backstage at the UN doing this project for David, for the New Yorker. And it was during Obama's first address to the General Assembly at the UN as president. And in those days, if you remember, he was still a political messiah. I was surrounded by Hillary, Rahm Emanuel, Axelrod, about 15 security guys, sniffer dogs, and Obama's medic team. Suddenly, in the small corridor, while Obama's making the speech, things are very tense. There's this huge crowd swell of about as many people as there are in this room coming towards us, and the Secret Service guys start freaking out. In the middle of the crowd swell is Gaddafi, marching in slow motion defiance, and he's surrounded by all his female bodyguards dressed head to foot in military clothing. He walks up to me as if to say, I will sit for you for a portrait on American soil, but I will do it under the nose of the White House administration while they watch. And that defiance permeated this picture. And people say to me often, is he really crazy? Is he nuts? And despite having his eyebrows tattooed on, he may well be crazy, but he's not to be underestimated, and he's still here. Next, somewhere. All right, another bad boy. So after he'd made a very, very controversial speech at the UN, so much so that so many of the member states walked out of the auditorium in protest. But I didn't know this was going on because I was backstage operating in a complete bubble, and I was surrounded by all his admirers and fans. So when he came off stage to where I was, he was patted on the back, congratulated, and they all swarmed around him, about 200 people, and they started walking away, and I was losing my chance to get him. So I elbowed my way into the scrum, the crowd. I grabbed both his hands, and I looked into his eyes, and I said, come with me. I'm going to take your picture. I tugged his hands gently, and the amazing thing is he started to follow me. And as I pulled him, the whole crowd moved with us. I pulled him to my setup, sat him down, and then he suddenly realized that actually he's performing in front of all his adoring fans. And for a split second, he lost his composure, and it created the most weird, menacing leer I've ever captured on film. I know, it's perfect, isn't it? So, everybody I normally meet is with a formal stiff handshake in politics, right folks? But this guy operates on another level. He slid in sideways from nowhere. He perched his bottom on the stool, gave me this Hollywood knowing sexy look, and then continued sideways out the other side. It was the most elegant maneuver I've ever seen in my life, kind of like Fred Astaire gliding across an Art Deco stage. So we went to Burma, as Carol eloquently said. These are the 3 monks who led the Saffron Revolution. And as I said in the video, I wanted to show them as kings, not victims. These little girls, when they were all babies, in a hospital in Burma, they were injected with contaminated blood, and they all contracted HIV. And there's no one to care for them, so now they live in an orphanage in Thailand. They were very frightened of me when I did this picture, and there was no way I was going to get them to pose. So you can see they're all wearing a face paint. It's actually like a sunblock, and it helps cool their skin because it's over 100 degrees. So I sat down on the floor with the little girls at the front, and I asked them to mix up the paste and show me how it works, and actually put the same paste on my face. And while we did that, there was a transference of power from me, the older man with the camera. These little girls were now in control, showing me how something is done. And when it came to taking the picture, they were now in control. They were now empowered, and that's how I needed to show them to the world. This man stepped on a landmine, and it's pretty brutal to look at, so you can only imagine what it's like for him to live with this. To my knowledge, Burma is the only country in the world that still officially uses landmines. These two ladies were so courageous. They're both journalists, and their job is to go into Burma and hide these video cameras in their handbags or in a rolled up newspaper and secretly film human rights abuses on the streets by the military police or secret police. Now if they get caught, you can't imagine what would happen to them. The taller lady arrived on the sitting with a baby. She had a 3-month-old baby, and I remember saying to her, I don't know how you can do your job, which is so dangerous, and put your life at risk when you have a responsibility for your young child. And she said to me, I believe in all my heart that I'm trying to be the best mom I can by making the world a better place for my daughter to grow up in. Next. So by now I was completely obsessed with Aung San Suu Kyi, who had been locked up in house arrest through this whole period that I was working. Suddenly she was released, and the day she was released I started making plans to get myself into Burma with a tourist visa and hide all the equipment in a student backpack to do a portrait of her. I went to her offices straight off the plane. The office was a dump. They had one 1980s computer, one phone line, a blackboard downstairs where all the kids are taught to speak English and write. And there was an old lady upstairs cranking out this little printing machine, printing pictures of Aung San Suu Kyi to give out to the crowds. And there was an old transistor radio, believe it or not, was playing Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan. She walked in the room, and I've never experienced this before in my life. It was like meeting Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King all rolled up in one. And I remember saying to her, "Is love the most important thing?" And she said, "No." She said, "Love is based on passion, and it peaks and it dips, and you can't sustain that through a lifetime that's very challenging." She said, "Friendship and kindness are the constant emotions, and they are the things that we can always fall back on." So I said, "When you were locked up, what music did you listen to?" She said, "I listened to Bach to inspire me, Mozart to calm me, and I do quite like Bob Marley, but don't tell anyone." So then I was sent to Egypt, and I set up a studio in the middle of Tahrir Square during all the demonstrations. And I invited the revolution to sit for me, and this is what happened. Next. This lady is a theatre director, and she was tweeting from the square. Next. This man is a human rights activist who brought his baby boy to every big demonstration there was. Next. This is a very important picture and a very important moment. The lady is the mother of a man called Khalid Saeed. The man is a guy called Wael Ghonim. This lady's son, you see the picture of him on the cushion, was brutally beaten to death by 2 military police on the steps of her home. And this guy, who worked for Google, created a Facebook page saying, "We are all Khalid Saeed," as if to say this could happen to any of us. That Facebook page blew up, and you could say that it was one of the main sparks of the Egyptian revolution. So what you have here is one of the main genesis of a complete revolution. And I was so humbled to actually get a chance to do this. We took the picture in our home, and afterwards she invited me to dinner. So she cooked for me. And as I was chatting to her in the kitchen, she took a piece of bread, dipped it in the homemade sauce, and put it directly into my mouth. I said, "That's the kind of thing my mum does to me." She said, "I want you to think of me as your mother." She said, "I lost my son, but now I am mother of all Egypt." This man is the great writer Aswani. When he was on Tahrir Square one day, he's very famous, he decided to have a cigarette to calm his nerves during the revolution. So he lit up a cigarette. This elderly lady approached him, quite conservative, and she said, "Excuse me, are you really Mr. Aswani, the great writer?" He said, "Yes, I am." She said, "Your work has inspired me and my family to raise the bar, and I want to thank you so much for your incredible artistic words." She said, "I have to shake your hand." So he shook her hand. And then she said, "By the way, young man, you dropped your cigarette packet on the floor. This is our square, and people have died fighting to claim the square back. So show some bloody respect and pick up a cigarette." This lady, her husband was killed by a sniper on Tahrir Square. Now this is not a political picture, it's not even a religious picture, it's a human picture. And I wanted to show how vulnerable a lady is when she's just had a baby, and how vulnerable that family unit becomes when the man, the provider, the supporter is taken out of the equation. Next. I'm going to end here. This young man was so charismatic He was a beautiful fella. He had beautiful style. And there was a point during the revolution where the authorities were firing shot put into the audience, into the crowds, and the little lead pellets go in people's eyes and it blinds them. And it's a very effective way of crowd control. So this young man was blinded in one eye from a lead pellet. He told me that it's still lodged in his eye. And I said to him, you should go to a doctor. You should go to a surgeon. You need to deal with this. I mean, I can't think of anything more dangerous than having a piece of lead still in your eye. He said, my friend, I haven't got time to go to a doctor. I've got a nation to build. I don't know many young 21-year-olds who would say that. So with that spirit in mind, that sense of people power, I humbly ask you all to buy one of my pictures and try and raise some money to allow me to help cure society's amnesia with the support of Human Rights Watch and David Remnick and the New. Thank you so much for coming.